Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Carol Ann Liaros. Carol Ann is an intuitive consultant, lecturer, and teacher whose major interests are parapsychological research and education. For over 8 years, she worked at the Human Dimensions Institute in Buffalo, New York, as a research subject with Dr. Justice Smith and Dr. E. Douglas Dean. During this time, she was tested and found to be 93 to 97% accurate when predicting the future. Later, she went on to become the founder and director of Creative Community Institute, which is still in operation today. In addition, she appeared on hundreds of radio and television shows, including the national show That's Incredible. Carol Ann also appeared in the documentary movie Inner Spaces, narrated by Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth astronaut to venture to the moon. Also hosting her own weekly and cable television programs in Western New York for a number of years kept her in the regular spotlight, further sharing by teaching the simple truths that we are all intuitive. Carol Ann creatively designed progressive and innovative techniques which became known as the Liaros method and successfully teaches others to use their own intuition in practical, everyday ways. Embracing this core belief attracted the interest of professionals from all walks of life and resulted in her ultimately conducting dozens of successful workshops for medical and mental health professionals, worldwide major corporations, clergy of varying faiths, spiritual growth organizations, and many other professionals over the decades. Carol Ann's work is mentioned in approximately 24 books worldwide, which includes a complete chapter in Superlearning by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder. She is the past president of Rapid Changes Technology Incorporated, and for well over 15 years presented as a senior trainer at Edgar Cayce Center, the A.R.E., Association for Research and Enlightenment, based in Virginia Beach. Carol Ann, Bob and I are so happy to have you on the show again today. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be back again.
Yes, Carol Ann, thank you so very much for being on our show today. And audience, you are in for a real treat. Carol Ann is she is the best, and she is always at the top of her game when it comes to being able to answer questions and dig down and give you information that you need to move ahead. Carol Ann, we are so excited having you today. There are so many things that we want to talk to you about, and I know our audience will be enthralled with your answers. So let's start off with a biggie, which is this issue of ESP. How would a person know whether or not they have ESP, and could you define what ESP is and is not?
Sure. When I got in the field over 50 years ago, the term, or the label, I guess is a better word, ESP was very, very popular at that time, which stands for extrasensory perception, which implies that I, as a professional psychic, have something that you do not have. And, of course, since then, the whole attitude about that subject has changed. We're very aware that everyone has some level of what used to be called ESP, although today you hear people refer to it as psychic, intuitive. If you're talking to people who are more scientifically oriented or reading the scientific literature, you'll hear it referred to as Psi, P-S-I. And so by using those terms, it's more modern, more up-to-date, and so on. ESP has really become an old-fashioned term for this whole field. And I discovered quickly after I found out I could do these things, and so on, that everyone has it, because I began working with other friends of mine, and I began teaching workshops, and people discovered their own gifts of intuition or psychic ability or psi. And so we know that everyone has it to different degrees, of course, like any other abilities that we have. But we all have it. However, our educational system as a whole has not really encouraged that facet of our consciousness in the educational system, so we have pretty much learned to ignore it and to stuff it. and people find they have spontaneous experiences, and the reason they know there is a reality to this whole field is because they've had their own experiences.
Great, Carol Ann. I think that's a good point, that first-person knowledge and especially bodily felt sense, because much of this stuff you can actually feel in your body, or at least you have an awareness of that there's something else going on. You know, even like when a person has a lucid dream, like they ordinarily a person would be dreaming and they're not aware, but when you are have a lucid dream, you're awake. So you're aware that you're dreaming, and so that same kind of thing would happen. Now, I want to ask you about some terms that sometimes we hear in the media, but I believe that they definitely need clarification, because even in my mind, it's not always clear what these are. So I'm specifically referring to the terms of clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience, and whether or not there are other terms that or aspects we need to know about, and could you explain how those work and how would a person apply them?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned, because you're very much a feeler, that people feel things in their body that turn out to be very psychic. And that's true for someone like you who has what we refer to as clairsentience, which is a French word meaning clear feeling. And people like you who are empathetical feel things in their body, and once you feel them in your body and you pay attention to them and you learn how to interpret them, you discover that you've gotten psychic information that your body is signaling to you. But we haven't been taught the language of the body. But some people see things, and it's referred to as clairvoyance, another French word meaning clear seeing. And so it has to do with people who see things. Now, when I say see things, of course, I'm not referring to if you're in a room full of people, everyone can see everyone in the room, and unless they're blind. But clairvoyance means you can see it at a distance. It might be the next room, it might be the next building, it might be the next state, it might be the next continent, but it's still the faculty of seeing. And some people, when they say they see things, and I begin to question them, I ask them, where are you seeing it? And they sort of look at me like, what do you mean? And when I say, okay, close your eyes and relive that situation, where are you seeing it? And they're aware that they're seeing it in their mind's eye, if you will, or in their head, very much the way they would see their living room, but of course that's by memory. But they're seeing it that way. Some people attribute the fact of people who can see auras, the energy surrounding the body, as clairvoyance too. Seeing the aura is considered clairvoyant, but it is the seeing process. And one of the ways that you can tell if you tend to be more clairvoyant or seeing is if you're listening to a speaker and you can hear them very fine, no problem hearing them, but you have to move so you can see them while they're speaking. Very much that carries over into this whole psychic arena as clairvoyance. And if you listen to people's language, they will tell you what their psychic faculties are strongest. For example, people like you who are empathetic will use terms like I feel better, I feel like that was wrong, I feel, and they'll use the word feel. People who are more clairvoyant will say, oh, I see what you mean. So if you listen to language, I can tell whether a person is going to manifest a lot of clairvoyance or clairsentience, or the other one, which is clairaudience, another French word that means clear hearing. And some people hear things. Sometimes apparently it's like a voice external from them. They hear it in one of their ears, the right or left ear. Other people say they hear it in their head. Usually they'll say it's like their own voice, just like if they're sitting and listening to a lecture and suddenly they think, oh, I have to stop for milk on the way home. Well, it's that same sound in their head. It's like their own voice, but it has to do with something psychic that is going to happen or is going on, and so on. And then so far as I know, they haven't really put labels on the psychic process of smelling, because some people say they can smell certain flowers when someone is going to die or when someone is present, a spirit is present, and tasting. In some of the readings that I have given, I have tasted something and been able to tell, for example, if someone is allergic to certain foods or beverages because I can taste it in my mouth. So psychic, and that brings us to another piece of this, people use psychic and intuition interchangeably, and I do when I'm talking to the public, but there really is a distinct difference. When someone is talking about being psychic, they're talking about getting the information through their senses. They either see it psychically, they feel it, they hear it, they smell it, or they taste it. Intuition, as different than that, is instant knowing. The person will say, I didn't see anything, I didn't feel anything, I didn't hear anything, didn't smell anything, didn't taste anything. I just knew it. And so I differentiate the two processes that way. Psychic is through the senses, intuition is a knowing.
Carol Ann, wow, even though we know you, it is just amazing the clarity that you bring to this topic. I want to ask you this question, because, as I've said to you before, I was, when you met me, and before you met me, I was a skeptic. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I thought this was woo-hoo and, I don't know how far made up. But since I've had certain experiences, and then when I've scanned my life, I had to admit, so when this happened, I've had different miracle events. So my question to you is, whether you call it psychic or intuitive, where is the information coming from? That's where I'm puzzled about, because when I remember being in New York with Christine, we were at an intuition-type workshop, and the trainer said, I want you to pair up with someone that you don't know and to read them. And I remember finding that very shocking, and I said, this is not going to work. I mean, here's some guy, I don't know anything about him. And then when she just said, get in a receptive state, and she said, you don't need to zone out, just do it. And so all of a sudden I had the experience of this information, which I don't know, it just started coming almost like a radio receiver, and I said to the guy, I said, you're in a relationship, but this is a business relationship. And he said, yeah. And I said, this is a trust issue. And it was so, I was more amazed than he was, not just at the accuracy, but I actually felt like there was some information coming, but I had no sense of where it was coming from. So that's my question to you, and I know our audience would want to know, when you get this sense or whatever, where is this stuff coming from?
Well, it depends upon who you talk to, what their explanation or what they believe is going on here. Some people feel that guides are giving this information to them. Some people feel they have angels who are giving this information to them. So you have different opinions. My observation in what I do when I do my work, and what I watch the auras of other psychics when they work, is the fact that because we have the intent, and intent is so important, because we have the intent to tune into this other person, automatically energy follows thought. So we think we have the intent to tune into this person, and immediately our energy or our aura, the aura is the sum total of what we are, that radiates or appears to radiate from our body. It contains the frequency of what is going on with us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Contains the frequency of all of our past experiences and our unconscious, what we've chosen for us to happen in the future. So my experience is that I connect my aura with the other person, and in reality what I'm doing is I'm telling them things that they already know that is in their auric field. If it happened in their past, it's in their aura as a frequency. It's not there as a full picture. It's a frequency. And so that frequency then connects with my chakras and, I believe, the parasympathetic nervous system, and is transformed into pictures, clairvoyance, and feelings, clairsentience, and sometimes words, sounds, clairaudience. And when I watch the aura of psychics who give readings, that's what I see. Their intent takes their aura, the energy from their aura, connects it to the person they're reading for. Those frequencies then hit the parasympathetic nervous system, the chakras, and then the information surfaces and the psychic gives the reading. That's my perception of how that works.
And Carol Ann, very importantly, that distance is not a factor here, because you do readings on the phone.
Yes, 95 to 98% of my readings are on the phone. And so distance has nothing to do with it, and a lot of ESP experiments, to use that term, that have happened over the many years, it shows it does not diminish with distance. Distance doesn't matter.
This is all so incredible, Carol Ann. As I was listening to you in particular, and then my mind started to do its little wandering as you and Bob were talking, and what came to mind was the X-Men, you know, that movie series. And I said,
yes.
Wait, Carol Ann is Professor Xavier. And the way you're teaching and explaining this, because I know how, like Bob, surprised I was when I took different workshops, and when I took the workshop I took with you in New Jersey, and I was surprised at the information coming to me, how easily it came, and I was even more surprised when I got verification from the woman that I was talking to that I was correct in what I was perceiving.
That's correct. I mean, it's just amazing. Most people come in the workshop because they've had an experience and they want to understand it, really not believing that they can have, intuition or psychic impressions on demand.
Yes. And
if
I'm
your
not
intent is to do it, then that's what happens.
Exactly. I'm not sure, those in our listening audiences, whether, we have an audience of skeptic, believers, or what range in between. But as you said, this is getting just much more well-known, whether, and I suppose the term today may be intuition, although the way you define it, it seems we're really talking about psychic ability. And I think that, as you said, that ESP, that was what we started with, but this has sort of grown and changed and morphed, and I thought I would throw a few more terms in there. What are these experiences of telepathy and psychokinesis and psychometry? I know they're all very different, but could you explain those to us?
Well, psychokinesis, also quite often referred to as telekinesis or PK, is basically, simplistically, mind over matter. And, we've heard of A.R.E. Geller back in the 70s and 80s. He was very popular. This is taking your mind and making objects move. Now, one of the things that several psychics and healers have done in the laboratory is they have been in one room in a building, and they were told to change the dial on some instrument. In another part of the building, Olga Worrell did that, Uri Geller did that, and many others. And they were able to do it on demand. The scientists would say, okay, do it now, or maybe the computer picked the time, I don't remember. And then the dial on that particular instrument would change. And I was talking to Douglas Dean because I taught with Douglas Dean, Dr. Dean, back in the 70s for 5 or 6 years. And he was talking in the beginning of the lecture series. He would talk on a certain subject. And he talked about PK, or the mind over matter. In fact, there's a wonderful book called The PK Man. Unbelievable. Anyway, he would talk about that. And then I said, well, Douglas, let's show them how to do it. And he said, oh, that's very hard to do, Carol Ann. And no. I said, no, it's not. So the next week, we bought a bunch of dice, and each person had, what is it called, one die in a little paper cup, and they worked with a partner, and they had to shake that paper cup with the idea of making the number that they were going after come up. And so I told them how I did it, because I played that game many times, and it worked. And so I said, well, what you do is you become one with the die, and you turn yourself over. And so I took them through meditation, relaxation meditation, and then they shook the cup, and first they had to go for so many ones, and then so many twos, and so many threes, so on. And when Douglas did the statistics on it, because that was one of the things he was so interested in, he was astonished at how well people did with PK. It really takes a lot of concentration, very focused, very one-pointed. However, this is one of the many applications of our energy. Now, some people believe that healing, non-medical healing, I'll refer to it as right now, is a form of PK. They are concentrating on a person. They are sending that energy to their liver or whatever to make the liver become healed and well again. And so, in a sense, that's PK. That's mind over matter. The matter is the liver. So it's a fascinating field, and a lot of research has been done with it, a lot of it in the Soviet Union, and a small amount here in the United States.
It is very fascinating, and
yes,
let's continue the discussion, because you've really opened up so much. After a short break, audience will be back in a moment on Learn to Live Stress-Free with world-renowned psychic Carolann Liaros.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free. Today we're speaking with our very special featured guest, Carolann Liaros.
Now, you mentioned another term. You mentioned psychometry, and what was the other one? Telepathy?
And telepathy, that's from a distance.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is communication from one mind to another, or one consciousness to another. And several years ago, I believe it was in 1972 or 73, Dr. Dean, who I was teaching with, and he did research with some of my abilities. Anyway, he took a friend of mine who felt that she and I had a great deal of telepathy between us. When I would go into the office to do readings at the college, she could tell how intense the reading was because she would feel the energy in her head as she reported it, and she could tell if the reading was very intense or just sort of, normal kind of reading. So Douglas made arrangements at the State University of New York at Buffalo. They had a Faraday cage, and that shelters out all known energies, and he put Aggie, who was a handwriting analyst, into the Faraday cage attached to what is the brainwave machine called? It's at the
EMG, EEG.
EEG.
Yeah.
It's the brainwaves. Yes, and then she was attached to that. Then he closed the door, and of course it shields out all known energies. And then I was on the outside, and what he would do is he would signal to me when to go into alpha, when to go into that very relaxed state. and I would go into alpha, and within a second or two after I went into alpha, as it showed later, Aggie would go into alpha. When he signaled to me to come out of alpha, she would come out of alpha. And we did that over a period of several hours, and he was so excited because up until that time, which was 1972 or 3, that had only happened with identical twins. And so is telepathy real? Absolutely. There's no question about it. And the thing is, it is the consciousness of one, let's say my consciousness, but also I believe, and there is some proof of that everything has a consciousness. So can we communicate to inanimate objects because it has a consciousness? I believe we do. I ask my vehicle. I know nothing about my vehicle except turn the key and it starts, how to put gas in it, and that's the extent of my knowledge. But if something doesn't sound right and so on, I communicate with it and I ask, what is wrong with you? And I usually get an answer. It's either a picture in my head or I'll hear a word. I remember one time I heard tie rod. I had no idea what a tie rod was. So when I took it into the garage, the tie rod was about to break and so on. So,
well, you know,
anyway.
Carol Ann, for people that believe in this, is they don't have an issue. But for a skeptical person, I think a good example that people may be familiar with is in a business context. You hear business people say, well, you ask them, well, how did you make that decision? It says, oh, I used my gut. Right? They go, I went with my gut. And they'll say something like, if I go against my gut, I'm usually wrong, right? And then the other thing
it's much safer for business people to use that terminology rather than I use my psychic ability or my intuition or, you know.
Right,
yes.
And then the other, on an everyday basis, I know from the time that I was a kid that many people reported when you'd go into someone's apartment or home and they had flourishing plants. And I used to ask them, I said, well, gee, how do you get your plants to grow like this? This is amazing. And almost every single person I recall, even starting as a kid, they would say something like, I talked to the plants, or they played special music, or they said I have a relationship with my plants. And I remember as a child being puzzled. I was like, they talk to their plants. And so that was before I got a Venus flytrap, I think, when I was in 4th grade, and then I said, oh, they communicate with their the plants.
Well, there's a book out that came out many years ago called The Secret Life of Plants.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was, I believe, by Christopher Hill, I think.
Okay, and I just want to mention the thing that you mentioned about consciousness is there's a huge raising controversy in the academic and scholarly community. However, with that said, David Bohm, who was a famous physicist, he wrote extensively about the fact that everything was conscious, and the implicate and the explicit order and the superimplicate order. And so what you're saying has been actually validated scientifically. You know, the new research. I have so many studies to send you. What you're saying is, although it sounds fantastical, I'm not sure that it's actual word.
I don't know that is. I think you made that up.
You know, these days they're making up new words, so I can have a little liberty here.
Is that what you did?
Yeah, I just made up a word. It's fantastic, okay? But it sounds fantastic, but what we're talking about is the actual experience that people are having, and so that leads me right into this other experience that many people have, which is deja vu. I remember being on an elevator, and the doors open. I stepped off the elevator, and for like a moment, I turned around and I said, what's going on here? And I felt like I had been there before. And so that would be something. What's your explanation what might be happening there with the deja vu?
Well, I have read the explanation of other people, some psychologists and so on, who say it's sort of like a brain hiccup. In other words, there's some kind of I don't know if it's an electrical discharge that discharges at the wrong time or whatever, that you have that sense, but it's just because of some activity in the brain. I happen to believe, and Edgar Cayce who I know many of your audience probably have heard of Edgar Cayce, he said that we dream everything before we do it. And so that explanation would cover the fact that, you dreamt that. And for some reason, you remembered that dream. You didn't remember it as a dream. Other situations, too, people say they've been to a foreign country. And, in fact, my daughter had that experience about 3 years ago. She went to Greece, and she went to the Delphi Oracle, where the Delphi Oracle was, and she knew exactly. She told everyone where to turn left, where to go, etc., where they bathe themselves, and so on. And she said, I just knew it, Mom, because I'd been there before.
Right. It's interesting, Carol Ann, when you said that scientists at once thought that telepathy was only an experience of identical twins, because I think many of us, if we think about it, we can remember that moment where we thought about someone, they showed up, or some event happened to a loved one, and everybody in the family had a sense of, foreboding or joy or whatever it was, and after the event happened, they said, I knew that was what was going on, and they were in different locations, and they all had a sense, a connection of the same event.
And that's why people believe in its reality, because they've had their own experience.
And the easiest one, Carol Ann, is the obvious one. Before they had caller ID, I think almost every person that had a phone, at some point in their life, the phone would ring, and before they picked it up, they knew who it was.
That's right.
And it turned out to be true.
Yeah, and they actually weren't surprised when it was the right person on the other end of the phone. Exactly.
Yeah, that really happens so often. Carol Ann, we want to thank you for being with us today and giving us this information, explaining what it is to have psychic ability and what these different terms mean, and just to make it a little bit more accessible to all of us. We really appreciate it, and we're so happy that you were with us here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be with you. You two are a joy to be with.
Thank you so much. Carol Ann, would you let our audience know what your website is and how they can get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing and what you have coming up?
Well, I can tell you what my email address is, which is CALIAROS, in other words, Liaros at MSN.com, or my office number is 716-876-4414, and because I never use a computer, I don't know what my website number is.
Well, it's a good thing that we are such good friends, and I know what your website is.
Oh, good.
Your website is CarolAnnLiaros.com. That's CarolAnnLiaros.com. CarolAnnLiaros.com, and your office number was the 716-876-4414, and your email is CALiaros@MSN.com. So we're covered.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Ann, what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
Well, I think that if you look at us, we're like a diamond, and we have many facets. And when we go into the educational system, we polish up one facet of the diamond, our intellect. Well, what we're doing when we explore our own psychic, intuitive abilities, we're simply polishing up another facet of who we are and what we're about, so it's very empowering.
Great, Carol Ann. Thank you so much for that. I know that our audience really appreciated that. And audience, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank Carol Ann again for being our featured guest today. And audience, whatever time zone you're in, we just want to let you know how much we appreciate your presence, and we trust that you benefited from listening in some way from today's show. We, as always, look forward to receiving your comments about our show. Please let us know if there are additional topics you'd like to see us cover, or if there's a guest you enjoyed so much you'd like us to invite them back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to get the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call or email us today and see how we can help you. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.